Knowing Beau, Chapter 2. 3 days later, I saw him in the lawyer's office for the closing. When he gave me the remainder of the keys, he had told me he forgot the shed key, promised to bring it up to the house, and check his mail the next day. I was working inside, tearing off paneling from the wall, when I heard him yelling at the dogs. Now those old boys were lying on the patio in the sunshine, not bothering a soul. Boy, he hated those dogs. I went out and greeted him, and he insisted on walking into the backyard to check the key for the shed, to make sure it worked. I brought out the pitcher of lemonade and arranged the 2 patio chairs to face the garden area where the bird feeders were. We sat and sipped lemonade and talked for what seemed like hours. He told me more about his life there on that homestead. He had been on that property his entire life. He was born in the second-floor bedroom of the old farmhouse, which sat close to where the existing house is now. When he was 4 years old, his family lost every possession they owned when that house burnt to the ground one winter night. The family moved into a tiny cottage that was on the property while the existing house was being built. Beau pointed out a few large cut granite stones that served as footers for the old cottage, which had long since deteriorated and was now gone completely. He paused for a long moment as he reflected on long ago days. Surrounding the property was thousands of acres of woods and farmland for as far as the eye could see. Beau reminisced about walking the ridge with his old hound and coon hunting down in the hollow. He sat back and closed his eyes as the sunshine washed over his wrinkled face. As I sat there next to him in the sunshine on that summer day, feeling the breeze and listening to the leaves rustle on the trees and the birds chirping away, I found myself drifting off and closed my eyes as well. When Beau opened his eyes, he started to speak, and that brought me back too. He told me that 5 years earlier was the last year he got any peaches worth eating. Said his friends and church family were hauling them away by the bushel. The following year, an early frost caused the peaches to die and fall off the trees. Then, because the trees had not been pruned or taken care of, the yields diminished quickly. Then, as the dogs appeared, he got up and announced it was time for him to leave. I sat there dozing on and off in that chair, once again enjoying the quiet peace of that beautiful day. The dogs stretched out at my feet, doing the same. Over the next few weeks, Beau found reasons to stop by frequently, and we became very well acquainted. He shared stories about his life, and I really started to look forward to his visits. His mood started to soften, and I could see a change in his demeanor. One afternoon I returned home from a quick trip to the hardware store to find his truck in the driveway. When I walked around the corner and stepped onto the patio, I saw him sitting in his chair on the lawn, underneath the maple tree. He was actually petting one of the dogs, who was sitting quietly at his side. Weeks turned into months, and Beau and I had become friends. In early November, the house was far enough along in the renovations to where I was able to move into it. My wife, who was still in New England finishing up the sale of our home there, came out to join me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I had told her all about Beau, the time we spent together. She suggested having him over for Thanksgiving dinner, and I agreed enthusiastically. When Thanksgiving Day rolled around, the house looked and smelled great. Marie, my wife, was cooking a turkey and preparing all the trimmings, and smelling it was making me hungry. We had a small group there to help us celebrate. Thea, my oldest stepdaughter, was visiting from Kentucky with her husband and 2 children. Richard, my stepson, who was in the Marine Corps, stationed 4 hours away, had managed to get a couple days off and drove up to join us. My youngest stepdaughter, Lynn, was in college in Arizona and didn't have the time or money to make the trip. She ended up going home with her dorm mate for the day, who lived locally. My son Jake, who was a chef, was working in the restaurant that he owned with 2 of his friends in Boston and was unable to get away as well. Beau and Richard were getting acquainted while sharing stories of their experiences in the Corps. I was helping Marie in the kitchen with Thea, while her husband Rex kept the kids occupied in the den. As we sat down for dinner, Beau asked if he could pray for the blessing on the food. We enjoyed a delicious meal together with family and a new friend. Afterward, the women went into the kitchen to start the cleanup process. The men went into the living room with the kids and put the football games on the TV. A couple hours went by and Thea called in to us that it was almost time for coffee and pies. I lifted my head, waking up out of a doze, and looked around, not seeing Beau. I looked outside and there he was, sitting in the cool fall air with his head kicked back, apparently dozing as well. When I went out to let him know it was time for coffee, I quickly realized he was not sleeping. His head was back and his eyes were wide open. He sat down with the birds and passed away there in that chair. I went in and told Marie and Rex, who were standing in the kitchen. Rex took the kids and put them in the car. He told them he wanted to take them out for ice cream and to the park to play. I called the sheriff's department, who sent out a deputy and an ambulance. The paramedic said it looked like he went peacefully, and they took him to the hospital for a doctor to make it official. His old army buddy, Slim Paulson, traveled down from New England for the funeral. He was a little older than Beau, but was in much better shape and got around very well. After the funeral, he asked me if he could come over. There was something he needed to give me, he said. When at the house, Slim told me that Beau had left instructions with his will for me to have a box of his personal possessions. He explained in a letter to Slim that he had gotten to know me in the past few months and considered me a friend. Apparently he didn't have many, and he had absolutely no family. I opened the box and started to inspect the contents. I saw several documents and some personal items, but my eyes went directly to a smaller box with the seal of the Congress of the United States embossed on the cover. Next to it was a similar box with the Marine Corps emblem on it. I opened it first, found a purple heart medal. When I opened the second box, I couldn't believe what I found. It was a Congressional Medal of Honor. I looked at Slim, and with tears in his eyes, he asked, "You didn't have any idea, did you?" I told him that I in fact did not. He told me that Beau didn't like to talk about that day or his time in Korea in general. He described the day that Beau selfishly ran several trips from a riverbank where 9 of his squad lay wounded from an ambush attack to up on a knoll on a hill nearly a quarter-mile away where a medevac truck could get in to pick them up. Under fire, he just kept going back and forth until every wounded man was safely on that knoll. He survived, and because of his direct actions, so did 9 of his fellow soldiers. Slim told me that he himself was one of those men. He said he and his wife had 7 kids of their own, 6 now that his oldest son William had been killed in Vietnam decades ago. Together they had 21 grandkids. He said all of their lives were a direct result of Beau's actions that day. Slim reasoned that he lived because of Beau, and so all his kids and grandkids existed also because of Beau. Tears rolling down his cheek now, his wife Mary, who accompanied him down, reached for his hand, and with her other hand held his head and pulled it into her shoulder. Beau had a place of honor waiting for him in Arlington National Cemetery, but chose to be buried next to his wife up on a ridge out back where they had a special spot they enjoyed together instead. The farmer who owned the land knew what it meant to them, and he had deeded them a spot there. Also in the box was a birth certificate for a baby boy born in 1963. I looked at Slim, puzzled, and told him that Beau had told me that his wife and him did not have any kids. Slim just said, "They didn't, but they did once." He explained that Beau Jr., their only son, was 2 years old when he died in a horrific car crash. Beau had offered to drive them to the store that day, but his wife assured them that wasn't necessary. He was working outside, and she told him to keep working and they would be back shortly. They drove into town for some groceries, and on the way back, a truck crossed the center line and hit them in the rear of the car. and after he could not correct in time and get back into his own lane. That sent the car into a spin, and it rolled over into a ditch off the shoulder of the road. Aldea walked away with only minor cuts and bruises, but Beau Jr. was not so fortunate. Car seats were not commonplace back then, and he had been ejected from the seat he was in and broke his neck in the rollover. The doctor assured them his death was quick and painless. They had had a hard time conceiving Beau Jr. and did try after his death to have other children, with no success. Aldea took comfort in knowing their son was in heaven with the Lord. Some said that Beau could never really bring himself to talk about it, and he was never really the same afterward. It was always easier for him just to tell people that they didn't have any kids when asked the question. Also in the box was a small photo of Beau and Aldea taken on their wedding day, and her wedding ring. When he saw that, Slim pulled out Beau's wedding ring from his pocket and said, "I almost forgot, this goes with that as well." And he gave me the ring. At the bottom of the box was a silver chain with Beau's Marine Corps dog tags on it. Marie put the rings on the chain with the dog tags and hung them in the corner in the living room, right next to the wedding photo that she had framed. Right above that was Beau's Medal of Honor and his Purple Heart with the citations. Marie had them all arranged in a shadow box and hung there as well. The following Wednesday evening, we walked together into that little Baptist church for the 7 o'clock evening service. The pastor introduced himself and chatted with us for a while. He said he was glad we were there and hoped we would return on Sunday for service. We told him that we were glad to be there as well and that we believed we would be back. Now, 4 years later, we are faithful members of that little church. And on every Memorial Day and on the anniversary of that summer day I met Beau, Marie and I take the hike up to their special place on the ridge and place roses beside the graves of Beau and Aldea. I can't help but smile as I think of him every time I sit and watch the birds and take a bite of a nice, ripe, delicious peach. The end.